Pompeii was a city that believed itself immortal. Nestled near the Bay of Naples, bathed in sunlight and prosperity, it stood as one of the Roman Empire's most vibrant urban centers. Markets overflowed with wine and grain, bathhouses echoed with laughter, and villas adorned with frescoes displayed the confidence of a civilization that thought the gods smiled upon it. Above the city loomed Mount Vesuvius, green, quiet, and seemingly harmless. Few remembered that it was a volcano at all. To the people of Pompeii, it was nothing more than part of the landscape, a silent mountain that had slept longer than any living memory. But Pompeii was built on a lie. The ground beneath its streets was unstable, charged with forces no citizen could see. In the year 62 AD, the earth had already tried to warn them. A massive earthquake struck the region, collapsing temples, shattering homes, and killing countless residents. Entire districts were left in ruins. For a moment, fear gripped the city. Some believed it was a sign from the gods. Others whispered that something far worse was coming. Yet Rome endured disasters before. And as always, reconstruction followed destruction. 16 years later, Pompeii was still repairing itself. Scaffolding surrounded public buildings. Cracks remained in walls. But life had returned. Wealthy elites rebuilt grander villas. Taverns reopened. Brothels resumed business. The city refused to live in fear. The earthquake faded into memory, not as a warning, but as an inconvenience overcome. What no one understood was that the earthquake was not random. It was the volcano stretching beneath the surface. Pressure was building inside Vesuvius, silently, relentlessly. Magma rose through fractures deep underground. Gases accumulated with nowhere to escape. The mountain was not dead. It was waking up. On the morning of August 24, 79 AD, Pompeii awoke like any other day. Bakers lit their ovens. Merchants prepared their stalls. Slaves swept courtyards and carried water through narrow streets. The sky was clear. The sea was calm. Nothing suggested that this would be the final day of the city's existence. Then, shortly after midday, the mountain exploded. Without warning, Vesuvius tore itself open with a force unimaginable to those below. A massive column of ash, rock, and superheated gas blasted into the sky, rising more than 30 kilometers high. It darkened the sun. From miles away, people watched in disbelief as a towering cloud shaped like a pine tree spread across the heavens. In Pompeii, confusion turned into panic. Ash began to fall like black snow. Pebbles struck rooftops. The air filled with sulfur and choking dust. People screamed, prayed, and ran in every direction. Some believed it would pass. Others fled toward the gates. Many chose to shelter inside their homes, trusting stone walls to protect them. They were wrong. Within hours, the city was buried under layers of ash and pumice. Roofs collapsed under the weight. Streets vanished. Visibility dropped to nothing. Breathing became torture. The sky explained nothing, it only suffocated. Yet the worst had not arrived. As night fell, Vesuvius unleashed its deadliest weapon. Pyroclastic surges, avalanches of superheated gas and ash, raced down the mountainside at hundreds of kilometers per hour. They did not burn Pompeii. They erased it. Temperatures reached over 500 degrees Celsius. Lungs boiled. Flesh stiffened instantly. Death came in seconds. Entire families were frozen in their final moments. A mother shielding her child. A man clutching his valuables. Dogs chained and left behind. Pompeii did not have time to scream. By morning, the city no longer existed. It lay entombed beneath meters of volcanic debris. No birds. No voices. No movement. Only silence. Rome would continue. The empire would march on. But Pompeii was gone, sealed in darkness, preserved not by time, but by death itself. And for nearly 2,000 years, the world would forget that beneath the quiet Italian landscape, an entire civilization remained buried. Waiting to be uncovered. As ash continued to fall, Pompeii transformed into a labyrinth of fear. Streets that once echoed with commerce and laughter became corridors of suffocation. The sky, now completely black, erased any sense of direction. Day turned into night, but darker than any night the city had ever known. Torches flickered uselessly against the choking cloud, their flames swallowed by the ash-filled air. People moved blindly, coughing, stumbling over bodies already beginning to pile in the streets. Many tried to flee. Families rushed toward the city gates, clutching children, possessions, and false hope. But escape routes vanished quickly. Thick layers of pumice buried roads and clogged wheels. Animals collapsed in panic. Some were crushed beneath falling stones. Others suffocated where they stood. The city was no longer navigable. Pompeii had become a trap. Inside homes, terror took a different form. People barricaded doors, believing walls would save them. They wrapped cloth around their faces, soaked in water, trying to filter the air. They prayed to gods who did not answer. Ash seeped through every crack. Roofs groaned under unbearable weight. One by one, they collapsed, crushing those sheltering beneath. For hours, the city endured a slow execution. Breathing became agony. Lungs filled with ash. Throats burned raw. Death came not in dramatic flames, but in quiet, desperate gasps. Victims lost consciousness where they stood. Some collapsed beside tables still set for meals that would never be eaten. Others died in stairwells, trapped between floors, their escape cut short by the mountain above them. Yet Pompeii's final destruction was still approaching. In the early hours of the morning, Vesuvius shifted. The towering eruption column that had fed the ash storm collapsed inward. What followed was not a rain from the sky, but a wall from the mountain itself. Pyroclastic flows surged downward, unstoppable and absolute. They hugged the ground, racing faster than any human could run, carrying ash, gas, and death in a single breath. The first surge reached the outskirts of Pompeii with devastating speed. Temperatures were so extreme that survival was impossible. People died instantly, their muscles contracting violently, locking their bodies into rigid positions. There was no pain, no escape, no time to react. Entire streets were wiped clean of life in seconds. Subsequent surges followed, each one burying the city deeper. Walls collapsed. Buildings disintegrated. Pompeii was not burned, it was smothered, sealed beneath layers of volcanic material that hardened like concrete. What remained above ground was no longer recognizable as a city. It was a grave. By the end, more than 20 feet of ash and debris covered Pompeii. Vesuvius stood silent again, as if nothing had happened. The mountain that had destroyed a city returned to stillness. Nature erased its crime. Survivors were few. Those who had fled early enough watched from a distance as their homes disappeared beneath the cloud. They would never return. Pompeii was abandoned, struck from maps and memory. Rome recorded the disaster, then moved on. Empires did not pause for the dead. Over time, vegetation reclaimed the land. Vineyards grew above buried streets. Farmers plowed fields unaware that beneath their feet lay temples, taverns, and thousands of bodies frozen in their final moments. Pompeii became a legend, then a rumor, then nothing at all. For centuries, the city slept underground, untouched, unseen. Time passed. Kingdoms rose and fell. Religions spread. Wars reshaped Europe. And still, Pompeii remained sealed in darkness, perfectly preserved by the very force that destroyed it. But silence never lasts forever. Beneath the soil, the city waited. Waiting for hands to dig. Waiting for eyes to see. Waiting for the world to remember what happens when a civilization mistakes comfort for safety. Pompeii was not just a victim of a volcano. It was a warning buried alive. Pompeii did not decay like other ancient cities. It did not crumble slowly under centuries of neglect. It did not erode through war, invasion, or time. It was sealed in an instant, locked beneath volcanic stone, preserved exactly as it died. This is what made Pompeii different. This is what made it terrifying. Under layers of ash and pumice, the city became a capsule of death. Wooden doors rotted away, fabrics disintegrated, but walls, streets, and bodies remained. The ash hardened around human forms, capturing the shape of their final moments, faces twisted in terror, hands raised in defense. Children curled beside parents who could not save them. Death had paused the city in mid-breath. The pyroclastic surges that ended Pompeii did not burn everything to ash. Instead, they killed with heat so intense that life simply stopped. Blood boiled. Organs failed instantly. Muscles contracted in violent spasms, freezing bodies into rigid positions. Pompeii's citizens died faster than their minds could understand what was happening. In nearby Herculaneum, the fate was even worse. Hundreds of people crowded into boathouses near the shore, believing the sea would offer escape. When the surge arrived, it incinerated them where they stood. Archaeologists would later find skulls exploded from internal pressure, brains turned to glass by extreme heat. There was no survival. Only erasure. Yet after the destruction, the world did not rush to remember Pompeii. Rome had suffered disasters before. Fires, floods, earthquakes. The empire absorbed tragedy and moved on. Pompeii was written off as lost. Survivors rebuilt elsewhere. Trade routes shifted. Maps changed. Within decades, the city's name faded into obscurity. Faces twisted in terror. Hands raised in defense. Children curled beside parents who could not save them. Death had paused the city in mid-breath. The pyroclastic surges that ended Pompeii did not burn everything to ash. Instead, they killed with heat so intense that life simply stopped. Blood boiled. Organs failed instantly. Muscles contracted in violent spasms, freezing bodies into rigid positions. Pompeii's citizens died faster than their minds could understand what was happening. In nearby Herculaneum, the fate was even worse. Hundreds of people crowded into boathouses near the shore, believing the sea would offer escape. When the surge arrived, it incinerated them where they stood. Archaeologists would later find skulls exploded from internal pressure, brains turned to glass by extreme heat. There was no survival. Only erasure. Yet after the destruction, the world did not rush to remember Pompeii. Rome had suffered disasters before. Fires, floods, earthquakes. The empire absorbed tragedy and moved on. Pompeii was written off as lost. Survivors rebuilt elsewhere. Trade routes shifted. Maps changed. Within decades, the city's name faded into obscurity. Above the buried ruins, life returned. Grass grew. Trees took root. Farms spread across the land. Entire villages rose without knowing what lay beneath them. Generations lived and died on top of a grave containing thousands of silent witnesses. It was not until the 18th century that Pompeii began to surface again. By accident, workers digging canals struck stone walls covered in frescoes. Statues emerged from the dirt. Streets reappeared. Slowly, carefully, the city was unearthed. What archaeologists found shocked the world. Pompeii was not a ruin. It was a moment, perfectly preserved. Homes still contained furniture. Kitchens held pots. Graffiti covered walls, mocking politicians, advertising taverns, recording love affairs. Pompeii was not a mythological Rome of emperors and armies. It was ordinary life, frozen forever. Then came the bodies. When excavators noticed voids in the hardened ash, they poured plaster inside. When the ash was removed, human shapes emerged, exact replicas of people at the moment they died. The world came face to face with ancient fear. Pompeii's victims were no longer skeletons. They were people. The discovery horrified and fascinated Europe. Visitors traveled from across the continent to walk the streets of the dead. Pompeii became a mirror, reflecting humanity back at itself. Wealth did not matter. Status did not matter. In the end, everyone died the same way, powerless. Pompeii had become immortal, not through glory, but through annihilation. And yet, one question remained unanswered. Why did so many stay? Warnings had come. Earthquakes. Falling ash. Darkness. Time enough to flee. Some did escape. But thousands remained behind. Whether through disbelief, Fear, loyalty to home, or simple hesitation, they stayed, and paid the ultimate price. Pompeii revealed a truth far more disturbing than volcanic destruction. It showed how humans cling to normalcy even as disaster unfolds. How denial can be deadlier than fire. How civilizations collapse not only from force, but from refusal to believe the end has arrived. The city was not just buried by a mountain. It was buried by complacency. And the final chapter of Pompeii's story would prove that the volcano was only part of the tragedy. Pompeii is not remembered because it was great. It is remembered because it died in silence. Unlike empires that fell through war or conquest, Pompeii vanished without an enemy to blame, without a battle to commemorate. There were no heroes, no victories, no last stand. Only a city erased in a single day, leaving behind nothing but shadows trapped in ash. What makes Pompeii terrifying is not the volcano itself. It is the mirror it holds up to humanity. The people of Pompeii were not ignorant or primitive. They were educated, organized, and confident in their understanding of the world. They trusted routine. They trusted experience. They trusted that tomorrow would come, because it always had before. And in that trust, they sealed their fate. Mount Vesuvius did not roar for centuries. It did not threaten daily life. It blended into the landscape, a familiar presence that lost its danger through familiarity. The warning signs were subtle. Small earthquakes. Cracks in buildings. Shifts in water levels. Signals easy to dismiss when comfort demands denial. Pompeii chose stability over fear, and paid for it with extinction. Today, millions walk the streets of Pompeii. Tourists follow stone paths worn smooth by ancient footsteps. They peer into homes where meals were abandoned mid-preparation. They stand beside casts of victims frozen in terror. Pompeii has become a museum, but it is also a cemetery. Every wall is a gravestone. Every street is a mass grave. Scientists study the eruption to understand future disasters. Historians analyze daily life to understand ancient Rome. But beneath the data lies a deeper truth. Pompeii shows how quickly civilization can vanish. How fragile routine truly is. How a single day can erase centuries of progress. Vesuvius still stands. It remains one of the most dangerous volcanoes on Earth, looming over millions of people in modern Naples. The mountain that buried Pompeii is not finished. It is only sleeping. And when it wakes again, the question will not be whether destruction is possible, but whether humanity has learned anything from the past. Pompeii teaches that disaster does not announce itself with certainty. It whispers. It waits. It watches as people continue their lives, convinced that tragedy belongs to others, to history, to stories long finished. The history is not finished. Beneath layers of stone and ash, Pompeii continues to speak. Not as a warning carved in words, but as a scream trapped in silence. A reminder that nature does not negotiate. That time does not forgive. That survival depends not on strength or wealth, but on the willingness to recognize danger before it becomes inevitable. Pompeii was buried alive. And in its death, it left a message for every civilization that follows. Ignore the signs, and you may join it beneath the earth.